The Moroccan desert was not for the faint-hearted. Blinding sun pounded on parched earth, a horizon that glittered with heat, and recruits bereft of every comfort they had ever held onto. Phones, gone. Beds, gone. Privacy, a myth. Only the cacophony of drill staff, yelling orders with no tolerance for weakness, reminded them of the harsh truth they had enlisted into. This was Special Forces, world's toughest test, where stars were broken down, pushed to the limits, and tested to their extremes in ways the public had never witnessed before. But in that fire and sweat crucible, rumors started to spread. The team had gelled, working as one during moments of exhaustion and near collapse, all except one man, one name, one shadow that loomed over each tent, each hushed discussion, each flicker of rage. His name was Kody Brown. His face had adorned television sets for years, as the father of sister wives, the man who claimed to head his large family. He was accustomed to domination, accustomed to making the rules, expecting compliance, insisting on allegiance. But Morocco was another story. Here the playing field was evened. Here no one cared about his TLC past or his fractured marriages. Here he was just another recruit. And for the first time in decades, Kody had no wives to command, no house to storm out of, no cameras to spin his narrative. Instead, he had comrades who saw straight through him, and drill sergeants who refused to bend to his pride. From the start, the tension was undeniable. Teresa Judas, queen of table flipping, had come in with her daughter Gia, both fierce members in her own right. Brianna LaPaglia, otherwise known as Brianna Chicken Fry, was young, quick-witted, and brutally blunt. Olympians, football players, and tough competitors made up the ranks, united through survival. But when the cameras picked up Gia's smug smirk during a podcast interview, taunting that the cast bonded beautifully, except for one, the world went crazy with speculation. Who was the outcast? Who had shattered the tenuous harmony in the desert? Viewers didn't waste time figuring out the connections. All the breadcrumbs, all the muffled suggestions, pointed to Kody. It was almost poetic. Here was a man who had once had 4 wives and close to 20 children, now reduced to a soldier on orders, his power taken away from him. But instead of adjusting, Kody disobeyed. He resented the orders. He challenged authority. And worst of all, he attempted to lead in an environment where leadership was achieved, not asserted. It didn't take long before his other castmates perceived him not as a member of the team, but as a liability. Rumors claimed he spoke out of turn, griped about every obstacle, and attempted to talk over people with the same bravado that had torn his family apart. And then there was Brianna's confession. In a later interview, her voice trembled as she confessed that she had cried in front of the cameras, neither from physical discomfort, however, but from an act of one fellow cast member. One person who had made the experience hateful at times. No name was mentioned, but fans did not require one. The web was alight with speculation, and everyone looked to the man who had years earlier been accused of emotional abuse, control, and manipulation of his family. Could anyone else be responsible? Under the scorching sun of Morocco, the stage was set for a confrontation which no TLC editing suite could temper. Teresa and Gia, united by family ties, were not going to let another controlling individual tell them what to do. Team players had no use for conceit. And drill instructors, schooled in breaking egos, saw it the minute a recruit was all talk. Behind the walls of that desert barracks, Kody Brown's legend lost its thread. Each scowl, each tirade, each grumble complained on only fueled the flame. This was not the comeuppance he had envisioned. This was public exposure. Unbridled, uncensored, and damning. But here's the catch. Was Kody really Morocco's villain? Or had the producers already determined his destiny when the first camera rolled? Reality TV lives on villains. It survives on conflict. And if anybody had baggage heavy enough to assure drama, it was Kody Brown. Was he doing it to himself? Or was he simply falling into the trap of a script written long ago that he didn't know existed? One thing was for sure. When the dust settled in Morocco, Sister Wives fans, along with reality TV enthusiasts, would be watching with their eyes open. Would Kody emerge from the ashes redeemed, having proven himself in the ultimate test of his life, or would he buckle under the pressure of his own ego, solidifying his position as television's favorite villain? Before we go any further with this jaw-dropping unfolding, ensure you click on that subscribe button to Sister Wife Daily Scoop. You won't regret the twists, clashes, and explosive revelations in store in this tale. Because once the pilot launches, and the tape finally reveals what really went down in the desert, there will be no denying. Kody Brown will come out either battered or bare like never before. The Moroccan sun was relentless, a furnace of fire bearing down on each recruit who had the courage to set foot into the dunes. Sweat blinded their eyes, lungs strained against the dust-heavy air, and still the drill sergeants shouted harder, louder, hell-bent on shattering every shred of complacency remaining within them. On the weary faces was Kody Brown, his hair stuck to his forehead, his lips pressed together in frustration. He wasn't accustomed to this, not the heat, not the commands, and definitely not the lack of dominion. For years, his entire life had been structured around being in charge, the patriarch of his family, the one who imposed rules others had to abide. But out here in the harsh desert, that power didn't count. He was another body in the line, another training soldier, and it consumed him with every order he had to follow. Right from the start, the fissures began to form. As the other recruits struggled through obstacles, battered but together, Kody resented every regulation. Where one was meant to fall into place, he questioned. Where deference was required, he grumbled grievances. The other recruits took notice. Teresa Judas, toughened from her own struggles in the public eye, and determined to demonstrate her toughness, gave him pointed glares whenever his insubordination held up the group. Gia, who was younger but intensely loyal to her mother, complained quietly to others that Kody was bringing them down. Even those athletes who were built for endurance and collaboration started to take a step back from him, angry at the way he refused to change. And yet, Kody didn't even realize he was the problem. To him, he was standing up against injustice, displaying strength where others displayed weakness. He acted with the same swagger that once dominated his living room, the same pride that had broken his family. But the desert was not a living room, and the recruits weren't wives who could be guilted into silence. Every time he bucked against it, every time he spoke out of turn, the air in the room congealed with tension. The others weary, not only from the harsh conditions, but from the ongoing strain of his presence. Then there was the night the whispers started. In the faint light of the lanterns, camped around morsels of food and valuable minutes of sleep, the cast came together. They frightened one another, swapped tales, and joked about the craziness of it all. For a little while, the desert became less of a jail, and more like a fraternity, with the exception of one. Kody sat on the periphery, arms folded, his eyes scanning the circle as though he was being left out, and deliberately not participating. He didn't giggle, he didn't give, and when someone attempted to engage him in the conversation, his responses were brusque, reeking with contempt. The sense of camaraderie that had grown among the group solidified further against him. It soon enough hardened into suspicion. Brianna LaPaglia, who had thus far been surprisingly resilient for her age, finally began to crack under the pressure. In a moment of unguardedness, she confessed that the emotional toll wasn't from the drills, but from one individual specifically who made the experience so miserable. She never mentioned a name. There was no need to. The group already suspected who she was talking about. And when those outside the desert overheard the weakest whisper of her words, they too did. The internet buzzed, fingers wagged, and Kody's name spread like wildfire. Within the camp itself, that suspicion sharpened. Each look that passed between Teresa and Gia, each hushed discussion that ceased the moment Kody came into the tent, each exasperated sigh when he took exception to a command, made it build toward a breaking point. The drill leaders noticed it as well. They weren't blind men. In a camp that was meant to break egos, Kody's ego was more resilient than the majority. His defiance wasn't viewed as strength, but weakness, an unwillingness to change, a liability to the team. Nonetheless, he refused to conform. Every day he reminded himself he was the victim, that the others were against him because of who he was, not what he did. He held on to the thought that he was misunderstood, that his disobedience was a sign of independence, not arrogance. But the harder he struggled, the more he became alone. Where others drew closer, he was by himself. Where others suffered in unison, is where he bore alone his pride. And the desert, merciless and boundless, opened wide to engulf that pride. What none of them realized at the time was that this solitude, this break in the team, would not be kept under wraps, under the Moroccan sun. Cameras recorded everything. The stares, the tantrums, the silent tears. And when all of those tapes did come out, when the public got to see unbridled reality, Kody Brown found himself at the center of a tempest, much larger than any desert storm. The hours became jumbled together, the desert consuming them in a cloud of sand and fatigue. Every morning was the same brutal blast of the whistle, the same mad dash out of tents, the same thudding of boots on parched ground. For everyone else, it was normal, a survival rhythm of discipline and harmony. For Kody Brown, though, it was something different, something that reminded him daily that he was not in control, that his voice meant nothing here, that the others viewed him as mere dead weight. The first true break happened while they were on a march through the sand dunes. The recruits trudged along with large packs on their backs, each step into the hot sand. Teresa Judas struggled on with a determination that even the drill sergeants were impressed with, her face burning with effort, but her gait unchanging. Gia walked close behind her, refusing to let her mother give up. Brianna tripped over her own feet a few times, but continued forward, finding strength from the group. But Kody, he lagged behind, not because he couldn't carry the weight, but because he insisted on breaking cadence. He fell behind, then ran ahead, then bellowed loudly about how unfair it was, shattering the rhythm that the rest of them had worked so hard to sustain. At first, the others tuned him out, too exhausted to spend energy on arguing. But as his yelling increased, loud protests about the heat, the weight and the instructors, something snapped. Teresa turned mid-march, her voice sharp despite her exhaustion. "You're not helping anyone, Kody. Either keep up or stay behind." The words hung in the hot air like a spark against dry brush. Kody's face darkened, his pride stung, but he didn't reply. He just muttered under his breath, loud enough to be heard, but not clear enough to challenge directly. The tension was toxic, running through the group, so that even silence became unfriendly. It showed in the campfire glow that night. It showed in sides being taken. Teresa and Gia huddled together, their relationship unbreakable. Others clustered around them, their laughter subdued but genuine, the kind that occurs when survival is a common bond. Kody hung on the periphery, arms crossed, his face a scowl of disdain and loneliness. All efforts the team made to try to lift the mood seemed to fall off him like rocks off steel. He did not desire their presence, he desired their compliance, and that need only stretched the chasm further. The nadir occurred during a team-building exercise, a wall climbed to establish trust. Recruit by recruit, the others assisted each other over the hurdle, grasping hands, yelling encouragement, the kind of camaraderie the show found itself celebrating. When Kody's turn came, reluctance spread among the group. Gia stretched out a reluctant hand, glancing at Teresa for permission. Others backed away, not wanting to be the ones to lift him. Eventually they managed to work together, grunting in an attempt to roll him over. But as soon as he was on top, rather than assist the next climber, Kody just pulled himself over and came crashing down on the other side. No helping hand, no word of encouragement, just nothing. The reaction was instant. Gossip buzzed around the camp that evening, biting and stinging. Some said he was selfish, some sabotage. And though no one had the guts to confront him openly in the glare of the drill instructor's eyes, the glances spoke volume. He wasn't part of them. He was the internal enemy. Unknown to Kody, the cameras had seen it all. The eye rolls, the sighs, the collaboration in his absence, the betrayal of that climb. To everyone watching at home, the story was writing itself. The self-absorbed patriarch, who could not operate in a world where he did not rule. The man who asked for loyalty, but gave no loyalty back. By this time, even the staff had noticed. Kody's name was mentioned in whispered seconds at briefings, his resistance marked as a threat to morale. And although they pushed him harder, attempting to crack through that adamantine wall, the opposite effect was achieved. Every punishment reinforced his conviction that he was the victim, that the world was ganging up on him, that even here, halfway across the desert, he was being victimized. The desert is not concerned with pride. The drills will not accommodate ego. And as the others learned that one in blood and scrapes, Kody would not. His ego was his tool, and his tool was isolating him from all the rest. The desert was shattering him, not from without but from within. The sun rose brutally the following morning, setting the desert aflame with gold and fire. The air itself seemed to weigh heavy, oppressing every single recruit as if challenging them to succumb. The staff warned a timed stamina drill, long runs through rough terrain, wearing weighted vests attached to their bodies. It was a challenge not merely of endurance, but of will, of how much fight each of them had left in them when their bodies cried out for mercy. Right from the beginning, the group found a rhythm, their gasps in rough harmony, sand grating under boots. With each step, Gia matched her mother's stride, perspiration streaming down her face, but resolve chiseled into her every step. Teresa pushed on with unanticipated strength, her gaze on the horizon, each step bearing the determination of a woman, not to be defeated. Brianna stumbled but refused to give up, drawing on the support of those around her. And Kody, he began well, pushing out in front as if to make a point. But the desert has a tendency to deflate arrogance. Before long, his stride slowed, his breathing shallowed, and he fell back from the group, not because they had slackened their pace, but because he could not keep up. Every step appeared heavier than the previous one, and before long, his grumbling rang out again across the sand. This isn't right. They're picking on me. These weights are cheating. They didn't answer. Silence was worse than fight. If worse was possible, it was indifference. The others had ceased to react, giving him the satisfaction of responses no more. They watched ahead, locked in a common fight to survive, and he drifted in his own resentment. Mid-drill, the instructors ordered a water break. Recruits collapsed to the ground, grasping their canteens as lifelines. There were conversations sparked in spite of fatigue, Teresa making a joke, Brianna weakly laughing, Gia spurring everyone on with a fire well beyond her years. For an instant, even in this desolate wasteland, there was solidarity, a reminder that the fight was one they shared, that they were being forged into something greater than themselves. Kody remained separate once more, his canteen swinging at the end of his hand, his glare set on the group. To him their laughter was betrayal, their cohesion an attack. He grumbled curses under his breath, words no one bothered to interpret, before finally blurting loudly enough to freeze the group. "You all want me gone, don't you? That's what this is about. You can't handle a man who won't bow down." The air of the desert went still. Even the wind hesitated. Eyes looked at him, weary but intent. And this time, Teresa didn't keep her words back. "We don't want you away, Kody. We just want you to stop making it about yourself. We're all hurting. We're all bearing the burden. But you'd rather greet than struggle." The bite of her words struck deeper than the sun's warmth. Gia's response came next, even but with a shard of defiance. "If you put half as much effort into assisting us as you do into complaining, perhaps we might even begin to trust you." The staff didn't step in. They allowed the instant to hang, raw and unadorned, because sometimes the toughest lessons aren't yelled from above, they're said by peers. Kody's jaw was set, his face reddening, but he did not answer. He turned away, shoulders tense, pride keeping him from the very ones he required. The respite was over, and the march continued. The others moved forward in unison, feet falling back into step, while Kody fell behind, a solitary figure separated not by power, but by will. And the cameras? They recorded each moment. The sweat, the solidarity, the confrontation, the loneliness. Home viewers wouldn't watch a man struggling to survive. They would watch a man disintegrating, undone not by the desert, but by himself. The next phase tested everyone to their limits. Obstacle course constructed to simulate the randomness of battle. Crawling beneath barbed wire, scaling walls, splashing through trenches of mud. The sort of test that is intended to strip away any pretense of control and lay bare raw reality. The recruits stood at attention, shoulders laboring, faces dusty and sweaty. The whistle pierced the air, and bedlam erupted. Gia went first, tiny but lightning quick, slipping under the wire with the sort of dexterity that caused the instructors to nod their heads in approval. Teresa followed, her brawn evident as she climbed up walls by sheer force of will, grit pushing her forward where strength gave way. Brianna struggled quietly, each fall met with a rise, each slip met with fists clenched and pushing forward. And then Kody. Initially he charged at the course with unchecked vigor, as though to retake something he had already forfeited. He grunted vociferously with each movement, compelling attention once more upon himself, insisting upon recognition in the form of noise if not victory. Noisiness, however, did not defeat the course. His arms trembled on the rope climb, his knees collapsed in the mud pit, and by mid-course, he was struggling more than battling. The rest of them saw, but not with admiration. Gia gave him a glance as she flew by. Teresa cursed under her breath, but didn't drop her speed. And Brianna, though her own body was protesting, pushed ahead without looking back. It wasn't cruelty, it was survival. They couldn't hold him up any longer. That was when it occurred. At the wall, Kody slipped. His body thudded against the wood, his vest making him heavy, mud stuck on like chains. He swore out loud, pounding his fist on the ground. The instructor stepped back, allowing him to struggle with his pride. The cameras closed in, capturing every speck of anger seeping off his face. And then, the tantrum. He bellowed, not at the wall, not at the course, but at his family. You think you're better than me? You think this is proof? I've given up everything for you, and this is how you repay me, by laughing, by ganging up, by taking the side of strangers over your own husband, your own father. The desert wind took his words out across the course, stalling even the drill sergeants. Teresa halted mid-climb, knuckles whitening on the lip of the wall. Gia lingered at the landing, gasping, eyes fastened on him in anger and pain. Brianna halted knee-deep in mud, face smudged with tears. She hadn't intended to cry. The universe shifted in that instant. The cameras didn't only show a man failing an obstacle course, but a family's breakdown being shared with millions. Viewers wouldn't only witness a meltdown, they'd witness a confession, a peek at years of resentment and control erupting raw in the open air. But Teresa didn't keep the silence going. Her voice cut sharp, shaking with fatigue, but blazing with authenticity. You didn't sacrifice, Kody. You controlled. And this is who you are when no one props you up. Gasps rang out, not from the family, but from the crew. It was the first time anyone had ever uttered it on air, on tape, without subterfuge. The kind of line that would be used in trailers, analyzed in interviews, etched into the memory of this season. Kody stumbled, his chest heaving, his face flushed with rage, but sick with something more profound. He had lost control, not only of the course, but of the story. And in that loss, the walls he had constructed around himself came crashing down, brick by bitter brick. The whistle blew again, and the drill was over. Recruits moved forward, their faces smeared with dirt, sweat, and bruises. They stood on one another, drawing strength from collective hurt. But Kody? He walked by himself, his shadow stretched out long and heavy on the sand. The tape rolled on, unblinking, capturing all. And lurking in the back of everyone's head, family, crew, even audience, there was a daunting question taking shape. If this was Kody cracking under pressure in training, what would the courtroom be like when the stakes weren't survival, but custody, reputation, and truth? Night had descended, and the desert sky lay open and black, studded with stars that seemed to taunt the turmoil below. The recruits huddled around the darkening fire at the base camp, their bodies battered and aching, their brains still reeling from the brutal drills of the day. Their instructors left them to silence once, as if they realized the magnitude of what had been unleashed on the obstacle course required no further pressure. Kody sat off by himself, shoulders hung low, but eyes flaring in the light of the fire. He was a man trapped, desperate to restore a broken reputation, but every spark of fire indicated the truth. The guys he'd maintained for so long had split wide apart. Sitting opposite him, Teresa and Gia shared concerned glances, an unspoken understanding, lingering in the atmosphere. And then Brianna, who had been the most subdued throughout the day, spoke up with a quivering, soft voice. "Dad, why do you always make it about you?" The words cut deeper than any knife. Even the fire seemed to spit. Kody's head swiveled to face her, his jaw locked in place, but before he could speak, Teresa leaned in. "Don't glare at her. Answer her." Kody panted as if the desert itself was constricting him. He attempted to call upon the old bravado, the booming voice that had shushed them into submission. But the class had left him bare, and now, with the cameras running and no way out, his voice broke. Because I gave everything. I constructed this family, I held it together when all of you wanted to disperse. And now you all sit here judging me as if I'm the bad guy. As if I didn't spend my whole life protecting you. Gia laughed scornfully, her head shaking, her voice steel. Protecting us? You mean controlling us. You made the decisions of what was right, who was trustworthy, what we could say, when we could breathe. That wasn't protection, it was a cage. The ensuing silence was oppressive. Kody's face twisted in anger and denial, but his body deceived him. His hands shook, his shoulders slumped, his eyes sparkled with a combination of wrath and terror. The dancing firelight captured every tremor, every twitch of vulnerability. And then Teresa landed the punch no one saw coming. Do you even know what you've done to the kids? To Brianna? To Solomon and Ari? You think this is over in training camp? No, Dad. This is only the beginning. You're marching us right into court. And in that courtroom, the truth is going to kill you. The words came down hard. Last, irrevocable. For an instant, the campfire didn't feel like practice any longer. It felt like the lead up to trial, a rehearsal of the depositions that would ring out in an actual courtroom. The recruits gazed, the crew's cameras zoomed, and the world teetered on the brink of disaster. Kody's breathing became unsteady, irregular, his pride warring with panic. He parted his lips to reply, to reassert dominance, but the flames roared loud in the stillness, overwhelming him like judgment itself. That was when Brianna did something that rattled even the tough instructors. She took out a wadded-up piece of paper from her pocket, a letter she had written in clandestine, stashed away during recesses, scribbled with trembling hands. She didn't say anything. She simply looked at her father as she refolded it again, more tightly this time, and tucked it into her vest. The cameras recorded it. Everybody witnessed it. And although nobody knew what the letter said, the glance in her eyes revealed the truth. It was a message that would alter everything when the time arrived. The flames smoldered low, the desert chilly now, but the passion between them was stifling. This wasn't training anymore. This was a family disintegrating live, on video, with millions patiently waiting to see pieces crumble. Do you want me to advance session 6 into the time when Brianna's secret letter starts to hang over the narrative, suggesting it might be the perfect tool once the trial unfolds? The following morning dawned with an eerie quiet. The recruits stood at dawn, their shadows reaching out over the sand, as the drill instructors bellowed the day's commands. But for the Brown family, no push-up, no physical punishment, could compare to the burden of what hung unspoken. Everybody knew the training was no longer the tale. The tale was the break, captured on film, revealed under the sun of the desert. Kody moved stiffly, his expression locked in a mask of strained calm. He pretended that nothing had been said by that fire, that Brianna hadn't confronted him, that Teresa hadn't uttered the word court with such condemnatory conviction. But his hands betrayed him. They moved restlessly, his jaw was locked, and his eyes flickered anxiously to the cameras. He knew the tape was already sealed away, waiting to detonate when it was needed. While there was a break in the drills, Christine moved closer, her tone firm but cutting. Kody, you can't shut the kids up anymore. You can't spin their words when it's on record. The world is going to hear what you've done. Her words were as cutting as the desert wind. Kody snapped back. You think you know me? You think you know what it took to keep this family together? You've poisoned them against me. Christine did not blink. No, you did it to yourself. The drama spread like wildfire. Recruits were huddled together, whispering to each other. The camera team panned closer, and the instructors remained frozen, feeling that whatever was unfolding at the moment was well out of their hands. The training camp became a platform, and the show was raw reality. And Brianna packed up and went. Trembling hands crept into her vest and produced the folded letter again. Cameras trailed her every move, and even the hot desert wind fell silent. She looked at her father, her voice soft but resolute. This isn't about me. This is about all of us. Someday everyone will know what's in this letter. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow. But in court, when it counts most, this will tell more than you ever could. Kody's face went white. For the first time, he didn't shout, didn't struggle, didn't defend. His body folded in on itself, as if the combined weight of a lifetime of control, manipulation and terror had at last reached its breaking point. He knew that whatever Brianna had penned, it was more than just a child's scrawled ideas. It was proof. It was testimony waiting to burst. The instructors summoned the recruits to move, but the Browns refused to move. The court was no longer miles away. It was here, breathing down their necks, each word and each look constructing the case that soon would bleed into an actual trial. Kody glanced at Brianna, then at Christine, Teresa, and Gia, and finally at the cameras. His kingdom of silence had collapsed, and the entire world would soon see the ashes disperse. The desert training camp receded into memory, but its reverberations accompanied the Brown family right into the courthouse. Weeks passed, and the film had been passed around, whispers becoming headlines, headlines becoming subpoenas. The courtroom was filled, reporters curious onlookers, even old neighbors sat shoulder to shoulder. anticipating the moment that had been promised since the tape first surfaced. The truth? Kody came in his finest suit, shoulders squared as though to exude self-assurance, but eyes giving away a tempest. He looked around the benches, fixing his sight on Christine, Janelle, and Meri seated like an impenetrable front. And then his eyes stopped. His kids sat among them, not as relatives but as witnesses. The judge brought the session to order, her gavel ringing out as sharp as a knife. Papers rustled, lawyers smoothed ties, but all Kody could hear was the pounding of his own heart in his ears. Christine's lawyer stood up first, her voice firm and deliberate. Your Honor, this is not a case of broken marriages. It is a case of broken fatherhood. The tape from the training camp, already entered into evidence, demonstrates Mr. Brown's indifference to his children's emotional health. The tape, that accursed tape. Kody's gut churned as the court clerk rolled out a screen and hit play. The grainy video flooded the room, Kody's own voice snapping, rejecting, refuting, and then Brianna's shaking words. The courtroom was silent, so heavy it was almost like something was pressing on them. Kody attempted to suppress his rage, clenching the table in his fist, until his knuckles whitened. He yearned to yell, to take back his story, but for the first time in decades, he was powerless. The children's shouts drowned out his alibis. And then the moment no one anticipated. Brianna stood up herself from the witness stand, holding that creased letter in her hand. The judge leaned forward in his chair. Cameras flashed. The entire courtroom collectively held its breath. She held the paper with a trembling hand. Her voice shook, but every word struck harder than the previous one. This is what I couldn't tell him in front of him. This is what I had to write. Because to say it was too painful. My father, he doesn't see us. He doesn't love us the way he says. He only sees himself. Gasps echoed. Kody's lips parted, but no words came. For once the patriarch who always had a defense, stood speechless. The gavel slammed again to quiet the chaos, but nothing could quiet the truth that letter carried. Christine's eyes brimmed with tears, Janelle's fist tightened around the table, and even Meri turned her face aside, to conceal the feelings surging through her. Robyn, torn between loyalty and irrefutable evidence, sat petrified, unable to protect him. Kody Brown, the man once in command of his family with authority and confidence, was pinned against the wall. The children had testified, and the court had listened. The judge's chambers were like the center of a storm, muted, motionless, but filled with tension from the turmoil that had transpired. When she moved back to the bench, robes billowing, her expression inscrutable, the whole courtroom leaned in, held its breath as if expecting the ultimate burst of thunder. Kody sat rigidly at the defense table, his jaw locked so hard his teeth hurt. He repeated to himself the system was against him, that the wives had plotted, that the children had been coached, but even he couldn't deny the hush that descended. When Brianna's letter was read aloud, that hush had consumed the room, and still clung to the air like smoke after a fire. The judge tapped her gavel once, then set it down in her palm. Her voice, though subdued, was sharp. This court has taken pains to review the evidence before it. The children's testimony, the tape recordings, and the history of this family dynamic. While Mr. Brown has presented his case as a father fighting for custody, the preponderance of evidence indicates a pattern of emotional neglect, control, and disrespect for the well-being of the children. The words hit Kody like blows from a hammer. His chest constricted. He wanted to cut in, to shout that this wasn't happening, that he loved his children. But the cold regard of the judge held him down more strongly than chains ever could. The judge went on. Custody of the minor children will be with their mothers, Christine, Janelle, and Meri. Mr. Brown will have supervised, limited visitation rights, subject to his taking family therapy and parenting classes. In addition, this court finds credible the fears of the children of emotional harm. Until those circumstances are fulfilled, visitation will be limited. Gasps rippled through the room. Christine exhaled shakily. Janelle pressed her hands together, as though in silent prayer, and Meri's lips quivered as she fought back tears. Robyn bowed her head, caught between heartbreak and a dawning realization. Kody could no longer shield himself behind her loyalty. Kody leapt from his chair, his voice breaking with rage. This is a lie. They turned you all against me. I am their father. I am their provider. You can't take them away from me. The judge's gavel came down, hard and final. Sit down, Mr. Brown. This tantrum only serves to validate the fears expressed in this courtroom. If you want to visit your children, You will abide by this decision. Court is adjourned. The gavel rang out like a slamming door. A door that Kody could no longer push open. Journalists headed for the doors to write their stories. The strobe of cameras flashed like lightning, and wives clutched at their children as if mooring them to the tornado. Kody stood alone, perspiration glistening across his forehead. His authority laid bare for the world to see. The man who had controlled his household with absolute certainty now confronted the one thing he could not control. His children were no longer his, not in the manner he desired. They belonged to themselves. As the courtroom cleared out, Brianna tucked her letter back into her pocket, her words barely audible to herself. It's over now. But Kody knew, down in the hollow of his aching chest, that it wasn't over for him. It was only the start of his reckoning.